17 days after the funeral, my son called it practical. I called it my name on the title. The house still carried his aftershave in the hallway, faint and stubborn. Snow pressed against the window screens like a quiet crowd, and the furnace spoke in low, dependable breaths. I stood by the kitchen sink with my wedding band turned inward and listened to my boy explain my life. He listed good reasons in a good tone: taxes, maintenance, fall risks, an old roof with old shingles that would not outlast another Minnesota winter. He sounded like a pamphlet. He meant well, I suppose, and that is the soft coat people drape over a firm push. When he finished, I said thank you. Then I set a mug on the counter like a marker on a map. We were in my kitchen, not his, my table, my chairs, the oak he sanded with his father when he was 12, both of them laughing at a crooked leg. Laura, my daughter-in-law, sat near the stove and folded a list in half. She is efficient, and she likes the word plan the way some people like dessert. She smiled and said, "We need to be practical." The word "we" did a lot of work in that sentence. I nodded because nodding is not surrender. It is the space you leave for grace. I told them I had groceries to put away, and I placed each item slowly where it belonged, cans aligned, tea beside tea. My husband used to say, order is a kind of prayer. They waited for me to volunteer my keys. I did not. I set them in a small blue bowl shaped like a lake and let the silence show the shoreline. Snow picked up. The wind crossed the siding and made the house sound older than we were. Mark cleared his throat the way he does when he wants compliance. "We could list the Subaru while prices are high," he said, "then find you a nice condo near us." He slid a brochure across the table. The condo had smiling seniors and an indoor pool. I have nothing against pools, but I do not need to be chlorinated to be safe. "I'm fine here," I said, and kept my voice warm. Kindness is not the same as permission. He glanced at Laura. She met his eyes like people in a relay handing off a baton. "It's just the responsible thing," she said, "before the roof fails, before someone falls." She looked at my hands the way people look at old banisters, useful but in need of oversight. I opened the blue bowl and held up the spare key on a brass fob. "This is a loaner for emergencies," I said, "not a shift schedule." Then I put it back. No drama. Just a sentence that closed like a door. The word boundaries is fashionable, but it is also older than any trend. My grandmother used a fence and a clothesline to teach the principle. "You may hang your shirt on the line," she would say, "but not your neighbor's laundry." I made tea. I poured 3 cups. Hot water draws out what is inside a thing. People, too. They pressed again, gently like thumbs on a bruise. "We'll help arrange everything," Mark promised. "We can call the bank, transfer titles, update your online accounts." He said online the way you talk to someone who cannot keep up. I can keep up. I also know when help is a hand on the small of your back, steering you toward a door you did not choose. I did not argue. I set a folder on the table instead. It was cream with a pencil mark my husband once wrote on the corner. Inside sat insurance papers, the deed, and a letter in his handwriting. I did not open it. The letter was for later. I placed my palm on the folder like a quiet oath and said, "I'm not selling my life to save my future." The conversation paused. The house listened. Somewhere a baseboard clicked as it cooled. Laura sipped her tea and set it down without a saucer. A ring darkened on the oak. Love is noticing small insults and choosing which ones to forgive. I slid a coaster under her cup and asked if they would like soup. They were not hungry. We agreed to talk again in a week. They left with their brochures and their good intentions folded into a tote. I watched their car reverse down the driveway with confident lights. Then I locked the door, not a barricade, just a boundary drawn in brass. In the quiet, I let my shoulders drop. Grief lives heavy in the arms first. I washed the ring off the table and thought about the word practical. Here is a practical thing. The glove box letter. He wrote it last spring, on a day the lilacs smelled like a memory. He told me where to find it if the world ever tipped. Mags, he wrote, your name is yours. Keep it on what matters. I copied his words into my mind the way you copy a recipe you will need every winter. That night, the local news mumbled about lake effect snow and salt budgets. I called Robert, an old friend who reads HOA rules like novels. He is slow to speak and quick to listen. I told him about the conversation and asked for simple reminders. He said what he always says, measure twice, put it in writing. Let the rules carry the heavy parts so your heart doesn't have to. I slept with that sentence like a warm stone in my pocket. Morning arrived in blue light. My porch wore a fresh sheet of snow. The street was hushed except for a plow moving careful as a priest. I made oatmeal and read the bank's notice about phishing, passwords, and a new two-step sign-in. I smiled. People think older means offline. Older just means you have seen the same tricks with different coats. I opened my password book and updated what needed updating. Slow is steady. Steady is a kind of love. At 10, I walked to the HOA office in my wool coat and boots that remember many winters. Mrs. Carter, the manager, has a voice that could settle a classroom. We spoke about snow removal, roof inspections, and the rule that changes to exterior structures require owner approval. Owner, she said carefully, looking at the deed copy I brought. That's you, Maggie. I nodded. Sometimes hearing it from a rule is better than saying it to your son. I asked about notices, email format, and how to file a polite clarification if anyone attempted to schedule repairs or sales without the owner's consent. She printed a sample letter and circled the lines that mattered. Clear, calm, courteous, no barbs, no theatrical italics. This protects you, she said, and it honestly protects them too. I thanked her. Good rules are a handrail on a slick day. At the bank, Mr. Patel greeted me by name. The branch always smells faintly of peppermint in winter. He checked the status of my accounts, confirmed beneficiaries, and reviewed a durable power of attorney that lives like a fire extinguisher, present, proper, and mostly unneeded. We'll only accept changes with you here or with the proper documents, he said. I could feel my lungs expand. A promise written in policy is oxygen. I walked home past the church where the pastor was shoveling the steps. He waved, and I waved back. Grief is walking by places that once held the other half of your conversation. The wind was sharp, but the sky was honest. I stood on my porch and thought about practical love, how it looks like soup and salt and spelling your name correctly on a form. That afternoon, Laura texted me an article about falls, then a list of condos with holiday discounts, then a question about who had the Subaru title. I thanked her for caring and told her the title was safe. I added a sentence. Any changes to my home or car will be handled by me with the proper offices. Short and polite. I placed a period at the end and left it standing like a fence post. At 4, Mark arrived with a smile and a folder thicker than mine. He had printed calendars, estimates, timelines. He sat at my table like a foreman. I booked a roof inspection, he said, and a realtor can drop by Saturday to give a sense of the market. He tapped the papers as if tapping could make them mine. I breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Then I thanked him for his time and declined both. He bristled. It was small, like wind finding a crack, but I saw it. Mom, we're trying to help. You can't keep up this place alone. I looked around the kitchen that I cleaned, the laundry folding itself in the dryer hum, the list I made for salt and batteries. I am not alone, I said. I have neighbors, a ladder, and common sense. I smiled because love softens firm words without dulling them. He pushed once more. Let's at least collect your documents and passwords, so if something happens, we aren't scrambling. That word again, if. A word shaped like a hook. I nodded. If something happens, there is a folder with what is needed, I said. It has my writing and your father's. It lives where it should. Until then, my life is not a group project. The sentence surprised even me with its neatness. We reached the point where persuasion turns into management. You can feel it, like black ice under boots that looked steady a second ago. He suggested handover dates. He mentioned how busy he was and how taking this on would be such a relief for me. People often assign you a burden so they can be heroes. I rinsed 2 cups and said I would make supper. He declined and left with a half promise to return Saturday. When the door shut, I leaned against it and let my breath empty. Walls hold more than pictures. They hold the ache of being told gently what to do. I took the glove box letter from the folder and read only the first line. Mags, if you're reading this, we did life steady, and we'll do the rest steady too. I put the letter back. I am allowed to ration my courage. Saturday came with a bright sun that made the snow glare. My driveway was clean thanks to the neighbor boy who shovels for gas money and gratitude. At 11, a white SUV stopped in front of my house. A woman in a glossy coat stepped out with a clipboard smile. Maggie, I'm Carrie from North Pines Realty. Quick look, 10 minutes. She tried the friendly stride of someone already invited. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The cold bit kindly at my cheeks. I appreciate your time, I said, but there won't be a walk-through. She blinked. The SUV idled like a waiting thought. Your son told me, she began. My son is not on the deed, I said, with the soft voice people use in sanctuaries. There won't be a walk-through. I gave her a card with my phone number and a note. Owner declines showing. She thanked me and backed away, confusion folding her clipboard smile in half. 2 hours later, Mark arrived upset. To his credit, he did not raise his voice. He raised his eyebrows, which is a quieter kind of loud. You embarrassed me, he said. I had this lined up. I offered tea. He declined. He wanted a fight to prove his urgency. I would not give him one. Fighting is sometimes the courtesy we offer to bad ideas. I told him I had spoken with the HOA and the bank. I told him future appointments would be made by me. I told him the spare key was for emergencies, and tonight was not one. He paced, then stopped, then tried tenderness. I'm worried, Mom. There it was, the truest line of the day. I took his hand and squeezed. Thank you for worrying, I said. Let's worry in a way that honors both of us. That evening, I wrote a short email to everyone who needed to know. Ms. Carter at HOA, Mr. Patel at the bank, my insurance agent. Subject line, clarifying owner contact. I kept it professional and kind. I listed my preferred phone number and hours. I added one sentence at the end that tasted like a promise. Any proposals regarding sale, transfer, or major repairs should be addressed to me directly as titled owner. I read it twice, then hit send. The sound of a whooshing email can feel like snow sliding clean off a roof. Sunday after church, Laura hugged me tight and asked again about condos. I said I would keep the brochures for winter reading. That is also a boundary. Paper can sit without making decisions for you. On the way home, I bought salt, batteries, and a small plastic shovel for the trunk. In the parking lot, a woman my age helped a stranger load a Christmas tree. People are better than policies, but good policies keep people good. On Monday morning, I changed the Wi-Fi password and placed it in my folder. I labeled a file in case of emergency, and on the first page I wrote a prayer. Not the kind you read aloud, the kind that tells you who you are when a well-meaning voice suggests otherwise. I placed the folder in the drawer my husband always called the captain's desk. He would have appreciated the neatness. By noon, an email arrived from a roofing company confirming an appointment I had not made. The name on the request was my son's. I replied within 2 minutes. Thank you for your message. I, Maggie, titled homeowner, am not requesting an inspection at this time. Please remove any third-party scheduling for my property. I CC'd Mark and added, all home decisions will come from me. No italics, no exclamation marks, just a period that held. He called within the hour. His voice was tight, and behind it I heard the earnest boy who once fixed my screen door with too many staples. You're making this harder than it has to be, he said. I took a breath and pictured the lake in January, flat and honest. I'm making it steady, I said. That's how I was taught. That's how your father lived. It kept us safe. Silence moved between us like a slow wave. I don't want you to feel managed, he said softer. Then don't manage me, I answered, softer still. Sit with me. Ask. Let me say yes or no. I promise to do the same when it is your turn to hold the titles I do not see yet. He exhaled. I could hear the kettle begin to rattle on his end, as if the house wanted him to sip and think. That evening, while the sky turned the color of pewter, I wrote the words I had been circling for days. A boundary letter, 1 page, 4 short paragraphs. Respectful, clear. It began with gratitude. It listed what help looked like. It listed what help did not look like. It ended with a sentence my grandmother would recognize. My life is mine to manage, with love at the table and rules on the wall. I folded it and placed it by the blue bowl where keys rest between journeys. On Tuesday, I mailed the boundary letter to my son and his wife with a short note in my handwriting. I addressed it to their home, not to their inbox, because paper carries weight screens do not. I also slipped a copy into my folder. Copies matter when memories become selective. Then I made soup and set 2 extra bowls on the counter, not to guilt anyone, but to remind myself that love can stay while management leaves. By midweek, the weather eased. Sunshine broke over the lake like a tidy promise. I salted the steps, tapped the railing to knock off a ruffle of snow, and carried the trash out with careful feet. When I returned, a message waited on my phone. It was the HOA office. Mrs. Carter said a contractor had called to confirm Saturday's roof access. Name given by my son, unit listed as mine. She sounded neutral, which is the tone rules where to work. I thanked her for checking and asked her to send the policy paragraph about owner authorization. The email arrived before the kettle boiled. I printed it and slid it into my folder behind the deed, like a bookmark at the right chapter. That afternoon, I wrote a simple note to the contractor. Thank you for your time. The titled owner is not authorizing roof work or inspection this week. Please keep my property off your schedule until I contact you directly. I CC'd Mrs. Carter and my son. The sentence did not accuse. It named. Naming is a quiet way of setting down what is real. An hour later, the contractor replied, Understood, and added a line that made my shoulders drop. We will only accept work orders from the titled owner on file. The rules had drawn a circle around me, and it held. In the evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Laura on the porch with a container of baked ziti and a hesitant smile. The cold edged past her boots and tried to slip into my hallway. I made room for both of them. We did our Minnesota dance. Coats, shoes, pleasantries, then sat at the table where many truce talks have lived. She spoke first. "I didn't mean to push," she said. "I just worry." Her eyes had that fine trembling that comes right before common sense arrives. I nodded, ladling soup into bowls as ballast for our words. "You care, I know," I said. "Caring is welcome. Command is not." She swallowed. "We thought we were taking things off your plate." I looked at the plates, my plates, and touched the edge of one. "Sometimes lifting the plate also lifts the food," I said. "And then you're left hungry, and the helpers are full." She stared at the steam, then smiled in spite of herself. "Okay," she said softly. "Teach me the kind way to help." So I taught in the only way I know. We made a list titled "What Help Looks Like." It had 5 lines. Ask, don't assume. Offer with an exit. Use my name at offices, not yours. Accept my no as full. Celebrate my yes without polishing it into your plan. Then we made another list, a shorter one, titled "What Help Does Not Look Like." Scheduling without me. Passwords traded like recipes, keys used like passes. She folded both lists and tucked them into her purse. Before she left, she stood in the doorway with her coat unbuttoned and said, "Saturday, would you like me to bring groceries?" I said yes. A true yes is sturdier than 10 reluctant agreements. On Saturday morning, a white sedan idled at the curb again. A different realtor stepped out, a different clipboard, the same try. I met him on the porch with my warmest coat and my calmest voice. "Your client told me—" he started. I lifted a hand so he would not have to finish. "And the titled owner is telling you there is no showing," I said. "Here is a copy of the HOA policy and my card." He took both with a professional nod and said he understood. He complimented my wreath and wished me a nice day. He will likely forget the wreath and remember the policy. That is fine. I closed the door gently and stood inside the quiet like a chapel where something settled right. Later that day, the bank sent an alert, an attempt to add a new user to my online profile. The system blocked it. The message top-lined a phrase that sounded like a measured hand on my shoulder. "No changes made." I called Mr. Patel to thank him for the friction that kept me safe. He chuckled. "Friction is a feature," he said. "It keeps the car on the road." Mark called that evening with his breath already fast. "You reported me to the bank?" he asked. "I did not," I said. "I reported my boundaries to the bank. The system did its job." He was quiet long enough to hear himself. "I hate how this feels," he admitted. "I hate how being told no by my own mother feels like being told I have bad intentions." I closed my eyes and pictured him at 7 with grass-stained knees, offended that bedtime existed. "Telling you no is not calling you bad," I said. "It is calling me in charge of my life." We sat in the sound of our separate kitchens. I could hear his fridge hum, the strange intimacy that comes through cell towers. "What do you need from me?" he said at last. "I need you to let the rules carry the heavy parts," I said. "Stand beside me while they do." He exhaled a long, useful breath. "Okay, then I'm going to stop calling roofers," he said. "Good," I said. "And I'm going to ask before I schedule anything," he added. "Better," I said, and we both smiled into our receivers like people who had discovered a small bridge. The next week held ordinary, which is a victory dressed in plain clothes. I shoveled with the neighbor boy, and he told me about a girl who liked his hat. I baked a pan of oatmeal squares and wrapped half for the church coffee hour. I replaced the smoke detector battery with a chair steady under my hand. At night I read by the lamp my husband once repaired with a washer from the tackle box. Grief came and went like weather. Dignity stayed like furniture. On Wednesday, Mrs. Carter emailed to confirm they'd added a note in the HOA system. Owner authorization required for any vendors. She wrote one more line that mattered more than a policy. Maggie, you're doing right by yourself. I printed the email and placed it behind the policy page. Paper is not affection, but sometimes it feels close. I poured tea and held the warm mug in both hands until my knuckles softened. Friday brought a letter from my insurance company. It confirmed my home and auto policies were current, listed the named insured, me, and showed the emergency contact as my son for alerts only. I liked the clarity of that phrase, for alerts only. It felt like the proper job for worry, not steering, signaling. I texted a picture of the line to Mark with a heart and a period. He sent back a thumbs up and a period. This is how detente looks, neat and quiet. Sunday after church, I invited the children for lunch. I set the table with the plates we use when we want conversation to feel respectful. My son praised the roast. My daughter-in-law complimented the gravy. We sat with our forks and our histories and kept our voices honest. After pie, I pulled out the glove box letter. I did not read it all, only the parts that belonged on a family table. His handwriting leaned forward like it always did when he meant something. Mags, it said, if the boys ever call control of, let the rules correct the spelling. My son laughed, actually laughed, and covered his face with his hands like a boy who got caught finding the lesson himself. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. Dad would write that, he said. He did, I answered, and folded the letter back into its envelope like a small flag returned to a careful case. We washed dishes together, the way families cradle ordinary after a storm. Laura asked about the spare key. I took her to the blue bowl and handed the brass fob to her palm. Emergencies only, I said. The bad kind and the very good kind, like when you forget your pie and have to come back. She closed her fingers around the metal and nodded with a smile that reached her eyes. She placed the key back in the bowl herself. Ceremony teaches more than lecture. When they left, the house felt right-sized, not empty, not crowded, just itself. I sat by the window and watched two cardinals trade places on the bare lilac hedge. The lake held its winter face, flat and honest under a sky that keeps its own counsel. I thought about how we had arrived here, not by winning a fight, but by refusing to hold one. Natural consequences had done their quiet work. The HOA stopped what was not authorized. The bank protected what was properly named. The title did what titles do. It told the truth about who decides. A week later, I found an envelope on my porch. Inside lay a list in my son's handwriting. It was titled, in his neat engineer's print, Helping the Right Way. It echoed the list Laura and I had made, but in his words. At the bottom, he had drawn a small square and shaded it in. Beside it, he wrote, "This is the box where my need to fix things goes. We can open it together when you ask." I put the paper on my fridge with the magnet shaped like a canoe. Repair can be tender when it stops pretending to be rescue. February slipped in with powdery snow and sun that arrived before supper. I bought seeds because gardeners are stubborn in the holy ways. I labeled the packets with a black pen, and for no reason other than hope, I wrote my name on the back of each one. Maggie. Names belong on what matters. I made a note in my calendar to call for a spring roof inspection, booked by me on a Tuesday I chose, with a company I selected after 3 quotes. I underlined the line twice. Choice is a form of shelter. On a Thursday, the doorbell rang again, not with urgency, but with the patient ring of someone raised properly. A teenager from 2 houses down held out a bag with 2 warm loaves. "My mom made extra," she said, shy and proud in the same breath. I thanked her and asked how school was. She said they were reading a play about a king who gave his crown away and learned why crowns are heavy. I smiled. Rules are crowns too, I said, but the right ones don't pinch. That night, I wrote a short letter to my husband in the back of my recipe book because love needs a place to sit. I told him about the cardinals and the girl with the bread and the way our son is learning to help with a lighter hand. I told him I can feel the roof under snow and it feels sound. I told him the rules held when my hands shook, and I wrote a sentence that I hope he would underline. Steady is a kind of love. When I turned out the kitchen light, the house gave its small night noises, the furnace shifting, the wood adjusting, the faithful whisper of a place holding. On the table, the blue bowl reflected a thin moon from the window. The key lay still. It will move when it should, not because someone needs to feel needed. I stood there with my fingers on the chairbacks, like a woman steadying a ladder she has climbed properly, one rung at a time. Outside, the lake kept its quiet. Inside, the quiet kept me. And if you are listening with a brochure in your hand and a good intention folded twice in your pocket, here is my ending for you. Help is welcome. Control is not. Natural consequences are kinder than scolding. Policies can be love in uniform. And a titled name, spelled right, printed clear, placed where it belongs, isn't a wall against family. It is a door that opens when you knock. Knock, and I will set another plate. Sit, and we will eat warm bread. Ask, and I will say yes or no. Either answer will be steady. Either answer will be love.